seen or heard about this survey previously, just give you a quick high level stats about it. It is the largest and longest running survey of the hourly workforce in our country. And so we know this group is incredibly important to our economy, right? And making sure that things continue to run. And so as an employer of almost 500,000 of these folks, it's super important to us to gauge how they think about work and what we can do to continue to support them. So this is our 18th year. I can't even believe it. Debbie and I started here when we were like 5, and so it's been a minute. So we love the ability to look at this trend information, and we'll point out some of those things as we hop in. We have a variety of different ways of their answering. So we had over tens of thousands of respondents this year, so quite large. It's usually broken up into 3 groups that are relatively even. One is hourly workers looking for work. One is hourly workers who are temporary associates of ours. And then the third group is hourly workers of our customers. And so we get a nice mix to get a general sense of how people look at things. Um, and then finally, we break this data out by industry verticals. And so we certainly cover the full supply chain here. And so if you're interested in any type of additional information or you want a particular look at a certain type of data, don't hesitate to reach out to Debbie and we can track that down on your behalf and let you know. Debbie also is your link to participating in the survey in the future. So if you'd like to have a specific look at your hourly workers and how their responses compare nationally, we can definitely make sure and take care of you there. We're going to talk about a few things today. One, this labor stats in general. I always love to give some context around the economic conditions of the time period that our respondents actually give us this feedback. I think it's important to understand the psyche and sort of what they're living through at the moment. We'll go through some high level stats from our surveys that we do of our customers to sort of see what types of topics are trending. And then we'll dive into the survey and the recommendations. So first of all, the labor market is an interesting place today. I like to say there's a reason we're all tired because we're running around in this little hamster wheel called labor management. And so you'll see here it's very tight, right? Unemployment rate just over 4%. We've been seeing that stay relatively steady within a few tenths of a percentage point. The August results just came through for jobs, 142,000. There have been some adjustments here over the last 30 to 60 days on original numbers versus actual numbers. And so there's no doubt it's slow going, and the market is really feeling the burdens around, economic uncertainty and inflation. Not uncommon for an election year. Certainly, as we get closer, I suspect it will be turbulent as people are sort of awaiting those results, and then they'll make more business decisions, after that. One of the things that is a sort of a good sign here is this prime age labor rate here. So this is folks ages 24 to 55. So prime age for participation. This is up in 83.9. You see here also that's been fluctuating within a point or two this year. This participation rate has really rebounded nicely since COVID. It was very slow to rebound, and we were sitting in the 70s. And across the larger, participation rate in the 60s. And so, as the market has gotten a little bit tighter, folks have sort of gotten off the couch and said, hey, I need to engage here. Things are more expensive than they've been in the past. And so we're seeing that participation rate increase. And at the end of the day, there are still more jobs than people who are available to work, but that has really trimmed down as well. It used to be 2 or 2.5 jobs per every in person, and it's still over 1, but not by far. All right, and so we like to just show this, especially warehousing and manufacturing. You have a lot of national news around what is or isn't happening in these sectors. And so this just gives you a sense that at the end of the day, although it can be rocky in individual areas, warehousing is still holding, and so is manufacturing. They're both ahead of pre-pandemic levels, although in some cases slight. You see manufacturing's a little more flat but steady. It has not seen sort of the up and down that maybe warehousing has gone through. And so you see logistics still above the trend line. A couple months when we were looking at this and we saw sort of the, cliff here a little bit, we were very worried that it would go negative or at least past the trend line. And you'll see we're starting to see that lift sort of matching that trend line. So we're monitoring this very closely. If you're curious about these statistics sort of month to month or quarter to quarter, again, we produce a lot of this work to share with our company contacts. And so again, Debbie could be a great resource for you to say, hey, I'd like to see what this is looking like nationally. And then finally, this is just a quick look. We regularly survey our customers, many of you who may participate, so thank you in advance for following up with us. But we pulled some information last year, so you see Q3 and Q4. And then earlier this year, of course, we did some Q1, Q2, and then we just did sort of a pulse survey here in the last 60 days. And so you just see, there's movement. There's no doubt about it. This is maybe more movement than we would traditionally see. Again, we have very unique economic times with an election, and so it's just causing a lot of reevaluation, I would say, in our customer base. And so at the end of the day, you see a lot of retention scenarios here. What are we doing to retain our talent? And so there's going to be a lot of interesting things, hopefully, that you can take away from our survey data here. Attraction also is important, although you'll see here in the summer or this most recent summer that's sort of fallen away, as I think folks who have a sort of a peak season have done that hiring, right? And now they're focused on how do we keep all these people and take care of them. You see economic uncertainty just here in the last 3 or 4 months has sort of come in from that bottom 10 or barely 10, top 10 to number 2. And so you see again this sort of roller coaster look at sort of what's on everyone's mind here. And so again, just for you to have to see maybe, hey, what is my experience at my employer today compared to nationally? We support, 16, 17,000 customers across the country. So this just gives you a quick snapshot across the board of what people are thinking about. All right, so let's jump in, guys. So the survey, we do our best to pull out sort of major trends, especially highlighting anything that could be unique or different from previous years. And so we're focused on a few topics here. Advancement was a key theme in this year's survey. We're going to talk about treatment of hourly workers. It's on people's minds, so we want to equip you with maybe how to work through that. And then upskilling and training and the role that is playing in the psyche of a lot of these hourly workers. All right, so this is a question we've asked for 18 years. And so you won't be surprised, of course, what's the most important thing when you're looking for a job? Of course, pay rate is there. It has always been number one. So we're not surprised about that. But what is incredibly interesting this year is it's the pay rate and the importance of the pay rate and its relationship to advancement opportunities. So actually the importance of pay rates has actually declined in comparison to people's interest in advancement. And you can see that that's just something, again, to be aware of as you're talking to prospective candidates. So this is the sort of the attraction mode. What makes you unique compared to other folks who may have similar or competitive pay rates? So again, this is sort of one of the early themes that you'll be hearing me talk about is if you have examples in your facilities of people who've sort of worked up in your organization, I would be encouraging you to talk about those folks even during the interview process to be able to say, hey, Debbie started out at our facility at this layer and now she's managing second shift, or now she's the assistant plant manager, or now she runs this. These hourly workers are very keen to understand that people like them are successful and have the opportunity to move forward in your organization. Again, assuming pay rates are competitive and they're comparing a couple opportunities, they're honing in on this topic. So talk about that. I've, walked into many facilities where they have that person's picture, and then the new worker, that person is actually a guest during orientation, and they see that person on a regular, or people on a regular basis in the facility. And so it's just a great reminder to say, you have a career path here, and we have people here who have done exactly what you're interested in doing. All right. So other than pay, what else, guys? What else is important to these folks, especially around the topic of loyalty? And so, again, advancement is sitting up there with good benefits and consistent work. Again, the consistent work, not super surprised with inflation and everything. If you're in a scenario for hourly workers where you're providing partial work weeks, you're definitely at a disadvantage because folks are trying to make ends meet. Everything's more expensive than it was last year. And so folks are very focused on finding that stability because that stability of work, of course, then translates to financial health. And so they're very focused on getting an opportunity to find at least 40 hours of work. Um, Again, advancement, we're not surprised, especially based upon the previous question. They're just looking for, a company who promotes from within and that they're sort of taking care of their own. What's interesting here too is benefits is back up, which we have not seen in several years. And so we think really that because of the correction we saw post COVID, where pay increases were up 3, 4, 5, $6 an hour, folks were making literally more money than they had ever made in their entire lives. Um, that now there's a real sense of maybe I can actually afford some of these benefits. A lot of us offer benefits that our hourly workers can't afford. And so now that, that pendulum is sort of swung and they're much closer to that livable wage area, and they're paying for their car and their living arrangements and their cell phone, and they're getting a little more comfortable in that space. They're now looking back to say, awesome, what kinds of benefits are offered and are they affordable benefits, and they're more interested in that than they've been before. I would say this too on this topic. If you are crushing these top three, Kathy, I've got examples of advancement opportunities all day long. We offer very competitive and affordable benefits for our hourly workers. And, we have a consistent work week here. I would ask you then to look at everything else in the teens. That's sort of your next area of focus. You see things around culture, flexibility, understanding, respect. These are the types of things that you should now start to improve if they're not already good. Their workers are really making decisions with their feelings after pay rate and advancement are sort of handled. And so places that quote feel right to them are super important. And so just again, if you're in really good shape on the top few, those are the places I would encourage you to look next. I see some chats coming through here. Maybe this is a good time to hold. Oh, copies. Okay, good. Who was interviewed is the question. Yeah, so we had over, almost 20,000 respondents, all hourly workers in the space. So quite huge sample size to give you a sense of who's responding here. All right, so let's jump into shift. This is one of my favorite topics. I know because I sort of geek out on some of this a little bit, but I'm always very curious to see how hourly workers view shifts and how it changes over time. And so let me just see, hold on here that I'm not messing up. Oh, great. So one of the things here is, in a couple years ago, we had a situation where we only asked what shift do you prefer? And we actually had a company come to us and say, I'd really love to understand the gap between what they work and what they prefer. And so that's what you see here now. Purple is what they what they currently work, and then green is what their preference is. And so you'll see some huge gaps here. Like if you're saying, "Hey, we're really, really, really struggling to find people," you may take a look at like your 10-hour. You see a lot of folks. There's a gap there of people who work it and would prefer it. And so if you have some movement or want to try out some different shift looks, this could be a place to do it. I think another interesting thing that we haven't seen in now many years, so 4 or 5 years, is this renewed interest in this 12-hour or rotating shift scenario, 3 or 4 12s. We think we're seeing the interest in the 10s and the 12s because of the economic conditions. Not necessarily that people are looking for quote more days off to put up their feet and watch some football now that we're in awesome football season, but they're actually looking to squeeze in the full 40-hour week so that they can go get something else or do something else to make up for some of the inflationary pressure that they're experiencing at home. And so like I said, if you're seeing, you should be seeing a surge and sort of interest in this in these specific shifts because people are trying to make ends meet at home. You'll also see the gig work type work there. You see the 4 to 6 hour shifts, and then even flex, which is 2 to 4 shifts, but during a regular schedule. And so let me unbundle that for you a little bit. Um, Gig is sort of, let's say you have a regular shift that's 6 to 2 or 6 to 3. We would actually take those 8 hours and unbundle them to provide 2 4 hour shifts, for example. We're seeing a lot of growth in this space, which it had some steady growth here over the last couple of years since we've been asking about it. But I think maybe when I started sharing this information 3 years ago, like I had people in the audience who were like, "Kathy, that's a fad." Like gig work is a fad. It's gonna lose interest and people aren't gonna do it anymore. And we're just not seeing that. And we're seeing this in supply chain, people working in warehousing, working in manufacturing, working in logistics, and they're all about it. They want to come in and work some extra space. Debbie, if you can help me with some mute. I think I'm getting some
Yeah,
feedback here.
I definitely ask if everybody could mute. I don't know if I mute the whole group, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. So just something, yeah, to think about. Okay, great. And so the other thing I would say is that in gig, we've seen more, it's growing at a faster rate than the last 2 years. And we saw just sort of over 7% increase in hourly workers who had gig experience just compared to last year. And so you see, I mean, folks are really sort of, I guess, dipping their big toe in this experience and sort of seeing what they would like to see. Again, it's all about flexibility and how can these workers make ends meet and also take care of their families and their obligations at home. Um, Again, you also see the weekend shift got a little bit of a boost too. Again, all around flexibility and how can they get another dollar or two or 100 to make ends meet. Some other things around from a generational perspective. One, more Gen Z and boomers are working flex than the other two age groups. Boomers are working gig shifts at 2 times the other age groups, and they actually prefer gig shifts 3 times more than other age groups. And so I think the perception that older workers don't do gig or don't do flex type work is totally not true based upon our survey results. We think this for a few reasons. One, these folks are near retirement age. We're actually seeing some of our customers who are losing large numbers of folks to retirement using this as a way to keep those folks close to the business, but on partial or reduced schedules that meet the needs of the retiree and the company. And so I would encourage if you're in a space where it's like, man, I'm going to lose 10, 15, 20% of my workforce over the next 2 to 3 years, starting to think about how you could utilize gig or how you could utilize flex to keep those people with all this knowledge. I mean, they know everything, right? We all have them, the beloved employee who knows how to do everything. you know, you don't really want them walking out the door on a certain day, never to be seen again, except for the company picnic, And so this is a great way. Hey, can you come in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday mornings to get us started and then enjoy the rest of your week, doing your retirement things, that kind of thing. So just keep it in mind that you can use this any way you'd like. I mean, it can be students, it can be stay-at-home moms who are only available during this time frame. I mean, so if there's a certain group that you have in mind that you'd like to engage in this place, it's a great opportunity for you. We find that females are working gig shifts 2 times more than males. Females prefer flex shifts almost 2 times more than males. Again, it makes total sense. In some cases, they're the primary caretaker of the kiddos or elder care or something like that. And so they need more flexibility. It doesn't mean they don't want to work. They actually, I would say, really want to work. We just haven't provided them a place to plug in. And so having the opportunity to do some of this work allows you to engage with this group. Another just sort of very interesting stat that came out of the survey is we saw a 10% increase in workers who are willing to manage their work via an app. So think clocking in and out, monitoring their hours and pay, wanting to see what kind of benefits are available, when they're eligible for the next, whatever offering. And so again, early days, several years ago when we started managing a lot more things through the app for our own temporary associates. We had a lot of like, really? Are we sure? But, with the invention of geofencing, all the banking apps, all the cell phone apps, like our workers have gotten much more comfortable in that app space. And we're seeing, again, double-digit increase in workers who are like, heck yeah, I can do all that from my phone. Like, let's go. So I would say if you're not exploring additional sort of, employee experience type things that allow them to sort of see everything from their phone, definitely that train is coming your way. People who want that full experience and can see everything about their relationship with you as the employer is going to be super important. I think, and again, just generally the attitudes and sort of the adoption of technology, we're seeing a big hockey stick there. So, um, finally, you'll just see that circle there, that 77%. That's just gives you a sense of, if you're trying to recruit a person who what prefers one shift and you're trying to recruit them to another, this is just saying, hey, like I'm willing to consider that, but I'm absolutely going to need a different pay structure, and it's likely going to need to be more than your traditional shift differential. And so if you're having trouble, getting certain coverage on a shift and you're trying to convince someone who really doesn't prefer that shift to join, they may join for a certain period of time, but you can bet on some turnover in that space if you're not doing some type of significant increase to keep that worker on that shift. I always like to throw this in because we talk about pay rates a lot here because of course, number one thing driving people looking for work. But at the end of the day, if you're not in a position to, increase pay rates, certainly not sort of, building wide, but maybe you can do some pay increases in your hardest to fill roles or something like that. This is another option as you look at sort of quote the benefit package to offer some additional PTO. It's absolutely less expensive than, considering a dollar pay increase across your group. And the reality is, people love it. They're looking for benefits like this. I will say though, last year, this percentage of 69% interested in more PTO was up over 80%. And so you are seeing a decline, although still the vast majority, but a decline and people preferring our or pay rate increases. I think two things are driving that. One, the reality is pay increases in general has slowed a lot. It hasn't gone backwards, but we're not seeing the dollar, two, three, $4 pay increases. We're seeing much more incremental pay increases just across the country. So people are feeling that. Like, man, I used to, last couple of years, it's been at $2 and $3 and $4. Now it's 75 cents or, a dollar. So they're feeling that shrinkage just a little bit. And then again, like I said, the economic conditions around inflation and sort of recessionary pressures are real, and if they have a choice of taking some time off or getting a pay increase, there's just a larger population who's like, absolutely, I'll take higher pay rate. All right, so let's jump into treatment, guys. We ask a little bit, sort of this is a rear view mirror type question. What's the reason you left your last job? And we just want to give them sort of a stack ranking so that we can just sort of see what's on people's minds. And you'll see here at the top is, I felt like I wasn't treated well or fairly. And you'll see some other things like in this top five for sure, like, hey, people aren't meeting me where they are, understanding the situation I'm in. And so we just want to highlight this here because we're seeing some increase in that sentiment, which we haven't seen in previous years. And so I just think this is, again, assuming you have pay rate figured out and shift figured out, and you're still having, let's say, turnover concerns, or maybe you have a reputation scenario in your community that you're really trying to solve for. This is a great place to look. At the end of the day, hourly workers have I would say, a much stronger justice component than maybe they've had in previous generations. I don't think they're looking for favoritism or want to be treated differently. They're just looking like for their supervisors and the company policies to be fair, good and bad. Like, hey, you didn't do these things, here's the rule. You outperformed everyone else in your space. Here's how you get rewarded, right? But we get a lot of write-in comments around like there's a lot of bias. They're not consistent. They don't treat everyone consistently, and sometimes it isn't even for them. It's just something they're watching. And so I just think this is super important for you to be aware of and talk openly about with your leaders, because this is absolutely on people's minds. And what I will say is the younger the generation, the faster they are to act on seeing these things. And what I mean by that is the older generations, obviously, they're, 3, 4, 5 years from retirement. And if they see this stuff going on, it's either a shoulder shrug, like, yeah, this is just how it is. This is how it's always been. Or, I'm almost retired. Like, I'm so close. Like, I'm going to grin and bear it until I walk out of here. They're not really willing to jump and move. The younger generations, they identify it. Many of them aren't even coming and talking to you as HR leaders or as facility leaders. They're just out. They're turning in their notice and saying, see ya. And they know they can likely find another job relatively quickly in the marketplace. And so they're really willing to move at a much faster pace than maybe an older employee. And they're not really coming in to consult with you about how to fix it or how to make it better. They're just saying, I'm going to go take a look somewhere else. So something to keep in mind as you look at turnover data in particular. I would highly encourage you to look at that by generation to see if there's some type of disconnect that you may be missing here, likely in your supervisor group or your line lead group to the worker. Um, as far as gender here, I thought it was interesting. There's almost no difference between male and female responses in this category. So this is absolutely across the board. I think the other interesting thing here is the younger the worker is, the more they feel unappreciated and overworked. It's almost a 10% increase from boomers. Again, we don't get the sense from other questions we ask that it's sort of like a poor me. It's more of, I want to work for an employer who follows the letter, and they're upstanding citizens. I want to make an impact at this place. And to be able to do that, I need to understand the baseline. And so if the company is incredibly consistent and asks of their supervisors and leaders to be consistent, I think you really create a huge sense of loyalty because you're exhibiting that and creating huge credibility with these workers. We also found that males and Gen Zs were more likely to find jobs that paid more money compared to last year. although females reported much higher pay rates this year than compared to 2022. So almost 9% there. So the females are definitely seeing maybe a slight market correction, or they're definitely making some adjustments there, which we thought was interesting. We also saw 31% of Gen Zs reported higher wages compared to 22. Again, not surprising. I mean, Gen Zs are starting to come into those supervisory level roles, maybe more responsibility. They're coming, quote, of age, in your facility. So it makes sense that we'd see about a third of these folks saying, "Yeah, like I'm making more money." That sounds right to us. And so that was really great to see. We're not surprised. Of course, layoffs affected a much bigger number of Gen Z or Gen X and Boomers, almost 5 to 13% more than Gen Zs and Millennials. So again, not surprised, especially in these market conditions. Like, we already know we have an aging workforce, and then you pile on top of that poor economic conditions, and so that makes sense, of course. So super interesting. A lot we unpacked here on this slide alone, but a lot going on for sure as it relates to why people are turning, and what we can do to fix that. And then let's jump into learning. This is again a topic that has sort of near and dear to EmployBridge, just as a company. Like I said earlier, we employ hundreds of thousands of hourly workers, and many times, our companies are asking for a certain type of person with a certain skill set. We have amazing candidates, but they don't always match. And so our view on that is we have an obligation to do our best to fix that, right? And do what we can to help hourly workers learn new skills. And so we've always been interested in, like, do they want to learn new skills? you know, what is the sentiment? And so I'm happy to say, this number has always been over 90% of people who absolutely are willing to invest time to learn a new skill. What's different this year is an increase in that sort of purple area, that yes, I'm willing to invest time, but only if I'm paid. That has gone up for the first time ever. And so, again, we're not surprised because of the economic conditions that a lot of these folks are working under. That, hey, if this is another way for me to earn some extra money, then absolutely I will do that, versus, yeah, I will use my own time to learn the new skill. And so we call it out here, not incredibly significant, because you still see yes for free is still 47%, huge number. But you do have some folks who are thinking, is this a way for me to earn some additional income while I'm training, in addition to maybe after I've trained and have an opportunity to be promoted, or do something else? So the other thing I'll just call out in the bottom half of the slide there is, I mean, look at the time. These folks are willing to commit. I mean, just think about our own lives right now. Like, I'm a parent of a seventh grader who's in volleyball season right now, and like, we're barely breathing and eating, right? Like, it's very, very full. And so, these folks are like, hey, 1 to 2 hours a week, 3 to 4 hours a week, I'm willing to commit to get an opportunity to move
For sure,
forward, right, in my career.
vacation.
And so, just something super interesting here
It's
to
if
help you
I have
understand that
leftover
it's
approved
highly likely
vacation,
that you
is it
have
usable?
people
Is it
in your
no?
facility today who are interested in learning, and who are interested in committing to you, and to helping your facility continue to grow and be more productive. And so, I always use this to talk about, the grass isn't always greener. Like, hey, we don't have anyone in the facility who meets this perfectly, so we're going to go try to find someone. Likely that someone out there also doesn't have everything you'd like to have. So don't forget to look internally for your learners. They are there. We just need to figure out how to identify them, and then commit the time and resources to build them up. The reasons why people want to learn new skills, we're not surprised, right? To earn more money, of course. They want to continue to pursue the opportunities available to them. I really love seeing too that third bucket, that for the most part, workers want to stay in the industry. They want to invest in the skills that will help them grow in their space. I think there's been a perception maybe in the past that if you're in logistics or you're in manufacturing, that you're sort of running from those things. Like if I learned all these new things, like I'd get out of manufacturing as soon as I could. That's really not what we see in the survey results. We see folks who are like, yeah, like I really want to stay here. They want to move up from where they are, but they generally like the industry that they're in. Um, I think the other thing that's super interesting that we uncovered in some other questions is the number of workers who are actively looking for work fell by 10% compared to last year, which we haven't seen a drop like that maybe ever. So folks are really sort of staying put and aren't really looking for the, hey, I'm going to move for 25 cents over here, 50 cents over here, or I'm going to move somewhere else. Like we saw a lot of movement, right, during COVID, like I mean, cross country, up, down, north, south, like it was everywhere. So we're seeing that slow down quite a bit. Um, we saw job satisfaction up 7% across manufacturing and logistics. So we're seeing some folks being more content in the space, which is awesome to see. We also saw an increase in of job satisfaction 4% for women and 9% for boomers. And so again, I think this is sort of a natural settling post COVID, like people are working through like awesome. I'm going to be here for a while and I'm going to figure out a way to be successful here. The only caveat I would say is while job satisfaction is up, optimism about their financial future is down in every industry, except manufacturing, by the way. And so I think when I saw that, the first thing I thought was that you saw that steadiness that I shared economically. The manufacturing industry is just steady. It's not up, it's not down, but it's just holding. And I think folks in manufacturing are like, oh yes. you know, they're just a little more content maybe than folks in other industries who are experiencing some of this up and down. So I say that and wanted to call it out here because even though you like your job, if you're concerned about finances at home, that will absolutely impact work, right? It will certainly impact your personality from time to time if you're struggling to make ends meet, or just everything's just a little bit tighter. That comes with people to work. And so if you're experiencing like, man, these folks used to be happy-go-lucky people and now they're not that, they could be having some financial hardships that maybe in years past they weren't going through. And so hopefully that isn't a super long tail, and we can work through some of the economic scenarios in our country, but it's on people's minds and they're really concerned. And then this is again, I know I have a couple of favorite slides. This is another one. When we ask about upskilling in particular, and we asked our workers and sort of hourly workers across the country, what are you interested in? Like what are your top topics? And so you see here we pulled there's 6 different industry sectors here. And what I thought was so fascinating is automation and robotics was in the top 3 in every industry, which we've never seen before. And so again, just I think this continues to prove that these hourly workers are very in tune with what's going on around them. Certainly economically for sure, but then also like, hey, I have a skills gap and I want to learn something else. And hey, look, they understand the automation and robotics is headed their way. So whether it's in their facility already and they're sort of seeing that around them, or they're hearing about it either through the news or, family, friends, they understand like, hey, I've got to get on this bandwagon and get my arms around what's coming. So they're absolutely aware of sort of future development. I think in manufacturing specifically, we saw a 9% increase in workers who had worked in an automated environment compared to last year. So that sort of, matches up with, at least nationally, we're seeing manufacturers invest heavily in new equipment and more automated equipment. And so this didn't surprise us, but it was certainly a sizable jump in 1 year. We saw a 3% increase in manufacturing associates who had worked with robots compared to last year. And so definitely automation and robots are, especially in manufacturing, are sort of hot right now for these hourly workers. So let's jump into some recommendations here, and then we can get to some Q&A if you have any for me. We have sort of 6 recommendations that we'd love for you to consider. I would encourage you guys not to sort of boil the ocean on all this. This is a lot of information, but pick 1 or 2 things and really start to get in there and figure out what it could mean for your company. First, like I talked about early, focus on the career pathways available at your company and talk about them a lot, like maybe more than you think is comfortable, because people need to hear it, over and over and over to believe it. They need to see it in people who have worked up in the organization. Um, and I think too, the idea that an entry level worker is going to be happy in that role for 4, 5, 6, 7 years is just not realistic, right? These folks want to understand what their opportunity is, and that timing has to be right for you and for them. But even you get points, even for them knowing that it exists, even if they don't plan to take advantage of that 4 years from now. You all talking about that and creating that visibility for those opportunities, I think, is incredibly important. Look at your shifts. Some of you I know, like we've been working with several customers who are working through this right now. It's like, hey, we've never thought, we don't even know what gig means, Kathy. So could you start there? Or we've never considered flex before and we need to. Or like we can't keep the same shift we've kept for years. Like we can't find the people. And so, we've helped with some analysis there. And then we have the other side of it, right? Who they're out there trying. They're not doing anything crazy. They're not changing their entire facility or anything like that, but they're starting in pieces and sort of testing what that means. We've had some really cool stories of customers bringing their hourly workers along for the ride. What do you want? How would it look? Help us figure out how we could do that. And they've created focus groups and leadership teams to help them work through it. And so I would encourage too, like if you can and your structure allows it, like don't make it a leadership only effort to take a look at these shifts. Really talk to the workers who you will need to actually work those shifts and have them involved in the process. Pretty cool, I think, to see some successes come out of that. And then the third one here is, fair treatment and appreciation. Again, we talked about it a little bit. We're not saying, hey, everybody deserves more money and fanfare and freebies and, that kind of thing. That's really not what we're seeing in the survey. It's just, consistency. And when you can recognize, this is like recognition at the beginning of the shift meeting. These guys don't need their names and lights and that kind of thing. They just want that fair bar, and that everyone in the facility is getting treated the same, as I think really the sentiment of a lot of what we're seeing in the survey. And then, like I said, on the appreciation side, this doesn't have to be a huge budget. This is just saying thank you, for a job well done, or appreciate how you handled that, or, just our line leads and our supervisors being very aware of what's going on and taking the extra 10 seconds, 15 seconds as they're walking through to acknowledge someone doing something well. I think that's really what these folks are really looking for. And then finally, seek out upskilling and reskilling partners in your location or in your market. If you don't already have some type of training program. We hear a lot like, Kathy, that's so expensive. Like we could never stand that up. And I get it. So there are a lot of, consultant types, community colleges, those guys around you. Many of them, because of who you are and the company that you represent, they will do a lot of this at no charge, or they're willing to have you test out new curriculum or new setup and then use you as the testimonial to go sell it, to other people. And so don't be shy about asking for this. Of course, EmployBridge has also some learning. We have a Better Work Life Academy and Life Skills Studio program that we offer to our workers at no charge. And we also allow our companies, hourly workers to participate. And so, if you're not familiar with that, certainly Debbie can help provide you with some of those details to take a look at something like that if that would help you on your path. Respect and compassion for workers, again, I think we'd all love to say, of course, Kathy, but we also know that, we may have that one special supervisor on this one shift in this part of the building that you're like, please just do the right thing, I think the hourly workers are looking for the deviation, they're looking for scenarios in which things don't quite feel right. And so I think as you bring people along through this process, we shouldn't assume that these folks know how to do certain things or know how to act in certain situations or know that this type of behavior is expected. And so figuring out how to explain those hidden rules and work people through, hey, we understand this time, this is what happened, but next time, this is how we expect this to work out, right? Assuming that someone's done something on purpose or they should have known is really a tough spot to be in, especially with these hourly workers. In some cases, they do not have, the structure in their family or examples of folks, going to work every day and, moving up within a company and they don't know how to do that or how to have those conversations. And so providing some grace along the way and some compassion and bringing those folks along, I think is incredibly important. The folks who you want to keep, who are your top performers, may need a lot more of this than you think. If they're concerned about something, they are likely not going to bring it up to you. That's just not how they've been built. And so seeking them out and talking to them early and often that they are doing a great job, that you do see a path for them here for a long time, that they are making an impact at your company is incredibly important. And then finally, don't forget to pay people well. you know, I always say that if you're in the sort of the top 50 percentile, you're probably in pretty good shape. If you have some of these other things we've talked about going for you, you can probably, hold in finding and keeping good talent. If your pay rate is not there, so you're in the bottom 50th percentile in your immediate geography, you have to focus on that first. It doesn't matter how awesome your benefits are and how great you treat people, because you may not even get them in the door because they're not going to join because your pay rate is in rough shape. And so I know, we have access to competitive analysis on pay. I'm sure you all do too. If you ever need us for that, let us know. We're happy to help, but pay has to be a top priority. Again, like I don't think you have to eat the whole elephant, but certainly in the places where you're struggling the most to fill certain types of roles, don't be shy on the wages because folks around you are being incredibly competitive to get the best talent, and so you'll likely have to follow to be able to compete. Like I mentioned during the presentation, we do have regular EB insights. We do some monthly things, we do some annual things. If this is sort of your jam and you like this type of thing, we're happy to provide that to you on a regular basis. And Debbie can get you hooked up where a lot of this just miraculously appears in your email inbox, and you can take a look at this as we have new data that becomes available. So I appreciate the time. I know it's a lot. I will breathe and stop here, and then maybe we can open it up to questions or I can take a look at the chat here, Debbie, as we go.
Yep, we don't have any more questions in the chat so far, but please feel free to unmute and ask a question or type something in the chat as well. And if not, I mean, Kathy, once again, you've done a phenomenal job presenting this information. We really, really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Look, you're getting clap emojis too.
I'm getting claps. I mean,
I
so
know.
early in the day. So I will take those. Thank you guys. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And hey, just you guys committing to the 45 minutes or an hour here is a huge step in the right direction. And if any way we can share this information, I hear a lot, hey Kathy, like I already get all this, but my coworkers or, above me or beside me or however. And so if you need any help, sometimes, Debbie and I've done some of these presentations with individual employers and just their leadership team to help drive. Sometimes it's easier for it to come from people like us versus you having to be the cheerleader internally. And so any way we can help, if it's one of these topics or many of these topics, happy to do that as you think it's appropriate. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like we're good. So we had a great turnout today. Thanks to everyone for joining, and everybody have a great rest of the day. Thanks again, Kathy.
Yep. Take care, guys.
Bye,
See ya.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate
Have a
it.
good day.
Talk soon. See ya. Thank you.